Good morning. I'm going to be talking to you today about what public discourse is, and I'll be leading up to what the Public Discourse Project is going to be looking at. Public discourse is always already going on around us. It's everywhere, but because of that exact reason, it's actually going to take even more work to become aware of it. Some examples of public discourse include Wordle and all of the games that came before it. It includes TikTok and Vine and all of the popular apps that came before it. It includes the Winter Olympics and athletics in general, and the postponed Summer Olympics, and all the other talk of all of the other athletic related subject matter forever before it. It's Boris Johnson's lockdown parties and social distancing and COVID and political entitlement and all of the related discussion ever before it. Finally, it's Spotify and Joe Rogan and people taking their music off Spotify and celebrity sensationalism and activism and controversial behavior and everything else that ever led up to it. What you're supposed to take away from these examples then is that it's everything that is currently a part of what everybody's talking about, but it also includes all of the other discussion that led up to what we're currently talking about. Now, to give you a more formal definition, then, public discourse is any communication that happens amongst and between members of the public, which bears information having to do with a matter of public interest and importance. And looking at that last bit for a second, public interest and importance, the way that public works, anything they're interested in enough becomes important, but it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing. At the same time, you can sort of sense the importance of it based on whether the public is interested in it or not. Public interest, pardon me, public discourse is constant, ongoing, and as much a source of knowledge as a lens through which that knowledge is viewed by the public. For one expert, Mortimer Sellers, and we'll get to his ideas a little bit later, in his article, Ideals of public discourse signifies speeches, publications, and other statements made in pursuit of the public good. Now, when thinking about public discourse, one of the first considerations we've got to make is whether it's happening in an ethical fashion or not. The judgment is based on the effects of discourse on the public itself. Ethical public discourse helps everyone who perceives and takes part in it to understand the topic of discourse better than previously. It results in a more unified and better informed public. So that's the ethical way public discourse can happen. On the other hand, the unethical way that public discourse could happen would be where it does not help those who perceive and take part in it to understand the topic of discourse, and it results in a more polarized, more biased, more ignorant, more poorly informed public. So, ethical public discourse, by resulting in a more informed, reasonable, unified public, can be said to actually serve the common good, right? If the quality of discourse is such that everyone binds together because they can agree on what something means and whether it's important and its significance to all of the included people, that's what's going to cause it to, again, serve the common good, the good of everybody. However, unethical public discourse, by resulting in a less informed, less rational, more splintered public, most likely only serves a subset of the public, not the good of the entire public. Generally speaking, in fact, unethical public discourse often has as its goal the splintering of the very public it addresses. Generally, this happens because the person responsible for that discourse is trying to sow divisions between people so as to derive some power from those divisions. One example of it, and you will note in this example that I will not be using words like correct or incorrect or right or wrong, is the public discourse and surrounding the 2020 election. Now, there are two competing narratives surrounding the election. The first narrative is that the election seemed close at first, but its outcome was the result of election law working the way that it was meant to, and that the election represents the consensus of the American public and led to a peaceful transition of power as it should have. The second of the competing narratives is the election was stolen from its rightful winner, so the outcome doesn't matter. The current office holder and all his actions are therefore illegitimate, and the office holder himself should be replaced at all costs. Right? So these two narratives make up very different ways in which the public discourse surrounding the 2020 election happens. One of them is much more ethical in its effects on the public than the other one. One, the first narrative, embraces what there is more information to support. It unifies the public and reaffirms the values which, when shared, allow for the creation of community, which is actually the national identity itself. The other narrative is based upon a view that lacks factual support. It is a statement of values that fragment the public into smaller, more oppositional groups, thus undermining and threatening the national identity that the narrative claims to protect. Now we get to Sellers and his article, Ideals of Public Discourse. There are a number of specific ways in which public discourse can be undermined and a number of corresponding specific ill effects. Mortimer Sellers, in his Ideals of Public Discourse, gives us a sort of diagnostic manual for public discourse. It tells us what could go wrong, how it could go wrong, and what the effects are of it going wrong. Now, I mentioned the word diagnostic. Think of diagnostic in the sense of a diagnosis, like a medical one. A doctor tells you not only that you're sick through a diagnosis, but that doctor also tells you what you're sick with and how to treat it. Similarly, Sellers offers a way to understand not only that public discourse may be undermined from time to time, but how that came to be the case, and by extension, what we can do to address it. So then, and trust me when I say there will be more discussion of exactly how this works. I'm simply saying it now to kind of put it in your brain. On your next assignment, this is going to be what you're asked to do. And this is text directly from the assignments. You'll find it there as well. Quote, one of the most significant influences on how public discourse happens is social media. Your job in this essay would be to decide and then argue for social media's effects on the public discourse. Has social media facilitated communication in ways that have helped those involved to be more unified in a clear and mutual understanding of the topics of communication? That would be an ethical effect. Or has it facilitated communication in ways that are caused, excuse me, has it facilitated communication in ways that have caused those involved to be more polarized, more biased, more ignorant, and less able to understand the topics of communication? And that would be an unethical effect. So, all in all, this asks you to survey social media in general, and you've got your choice of what particular forms of social media to decide whether that social media has had an ethical or unethical effect in the public discourse that it facilitates. You're also going to have your choice of the topics that are discussed in that form of social media, right? So, really, there are going to be two specific topical choices you'll need to make. You'll need to choose your social media that you're looking at, and you'll have to choose the topics that you use in order to make your argument. For now, I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you again soon.